I always thought my parents would leave me everything when they passed. After all, I was their only child. But the day I found out I'd been completely cut out of their will, I felt like my entire world collapsed. All those sacrifices, all the years I cared for them, suddenly seemed meaningless. At first, I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking it must be a mistake. But the more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't accidental. They intentionally left me out, thinking I'd never get back at them, and that's when I started planning my comeback. Growing up, my parents always painted themselves as loving and fair. They were strict, yes, but I thought it came from care. I spent my teenage years helping around the house, working part-time jobs to ease their burden, and making sure their retirement would be comfortable. I never asked for anything, never rebelled, never caused problems. Yet, when they updated their will, my name was nowhere to be found. Instead, they had left everything to distant relatives I barely knew and a family friend who had never even set foot in our home. When I found the documents, I felt a wave of anger and disbelief. My mother's handwriting on the codicil was unmistakable, it was deliberate. I tried confronting them, asking why they had done this, but they just shrugged and said, "We think it's better this way." Better for whom? I had spent my life caring for them, and now I was treated as if I were nothing. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Nights were the worst. I kept replaying every memory, every sacrifice, every moment I'd been loyal, and it felt like none of it mattered. But the anger slowly turned into determination. I realized if they wanted to see me as powerless, I had to prove them wrong. And the more I thought about it, the more I saw a path, a way to turn the tables entirely, legally, without stooping to pettiness. I started researching estate laws, wills, and trusts, figuring I had to understand every angle. That's when I discovered something surprising. While they had updated the will, they hadn't touched the property deeds or certain investment accounts they jointly owned. These assets weren't explicitly mentioned in the will, meaning technically, I had a legal claim as the next of kin. It took weeks of digging through legal documents, tax records, and even old bank statements. I also quietly consulted a lawyer, someone who specialized in inheritance disputes. They confirmed my suspicion. Although my parents intended to cut me out, they had unknowingly left gaps I could exploit. The more I realized this, the more my hope and excitement grew. I kept my findings to myself, careful not to tip my parents off. They were smug, confident that I had no chance. They talked about their careful planning as if gloating was a sport. But behind the scenes, I quietly started organizing everything. I made sure every document, every legal form, and every financial record was ready. By the time I decided to make my move, there would be no chance of them reversing it. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about justice. I had been wronged, ignored, and betrayed, and now I had the power to claim what was rightfully mine. The thrill of turning the tables, while keeping everything perfectly legal, was intoxicating. It was no longer just about inheritance, it was about proving them wrong in the most dramatic way possible. I didn't announce my plans. I waited for the perfect moment. When my parents called me one afternoon to talk about the family, I knew it was time. I walked in, calm, collected, and acting as if I had no idea about the will at all. They smirked, clearly expecting me to be desperate or upset. I started casually discussing family finances, making sure to let them underestimate me. Then, I dropped the bombshell. I had already filed claims on the assets they thought were secure. Their faces went pale, eyes widening in disbelief. "But, how?" my father stammered. My mother looked like she might faint. I smiled, calmly explaining that their oversight in updating the deeds and accounts had given me legal leverage, and now, by law, I could claim ownership. The irony was sweet. These were the same people who had treated me as a burden, convinced I'd never be able to challenge their decisions. Now, I was in control. I watched as the weight of shock and regret settled on them. They tried to argue, tried to plead, but everything had been done correctly. Every step I took had been legal, every loophole perfectly documented. They had no power left. It wasn't about confrontation for the sake of drama. It was about showing them the consequences of underestimating me. And as I walked out, fully aware that I now legally owned the estate they tried to deny me, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. Every betrayal, every cold word, every dismissive glance had led to this exact moment. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through patience, planning, and strategy. After the confrontation, my parents retreated, leaving me to manage the estate. They tried reaching out a few times, offering apologies that felt hollow, but I stayed firm. I didn't want to sever ties completely, but the lesson had to be learned: betrayal comes with consequences. Friends and extended family were shocked when they found out. Many had assumed I was powerless or naive, yet here I was, legally in control. It wasn't just about owning the estate, it was about reclaiming my dignity and asserting my value. I had been counted out, dismissed, and yet I emerged stronger, wiser, and victorious. Interestingly, I noticed subtle changes in my parents over the months. They became quieter, more reserved, perhaps realizing that their attempts to manipulate and control had failed spectacularly. While the estate legally belonged to me, the real victory was emotional, watching them grapple with the consequences of their actions, silently acknowledging their mistake without ever admitting it openly. Looking back, being cut out of the will felt like the end of the world, but it became the catalyst for one of the most empowering chapters of my life. I learned the value of patience, research, and strategic thinking. More importantly, I realized that emotional strength often outweighs anger. By staying composed, analyzing the situation, and taking legal, careful steps, I not only reclaimed what was mine but also proved to myself that I could rise above betrayal without stooping to cruelty. Family betrayal is painful, but it can teach lessons about resilience, self-worth, and justice. The satisfaction of turning the tables, combined with the knowledge that I acted wisely and legally, is immeasurable. I now manage the estate responsibly, honor the memories of my family in my own way, and carry forward the lesson: never underestimate the person you think you've wronged. In the end, being cut out of my parents' will wasn't just a financial loss, it was a test of resilience and patience. I transformed hurt into strategy and betrayal into empowerment. Owning the estate isn't about revenge for me, it's about justice and reclaiming control over my life. Life can be unfair, but we have the power to rise above it. Sometimes, the quietest, most deliberate actions deliver the most satisfying victories. Betrayal may sting, but justice, when executed wisely, is sweeter than anyone can imagine.